With each passing year, more and more Necron tomb worlds awaken from their millennia-long slumber, releasing their legions into the expanse of the galaxy ravaged by war. Vast territories of the Empire have already been reclaimed, and the Necrons have no intentions of slowing their pace of expansion. Year 52 of the 40th millennium, the war in the core of Chogoris, the Necrons of Kokulos awaken and discover that the inner fire of their planet has extinguished. Lords of the awakening Ultep dynasty delve deep beneath the empty imperial hab blocks that mar the planet's face. They uncover an indescribable network of underground tunnels. The Lords lead their warriors deeper through the cylindrical corridors, hoping to discover why their world has become a lifeless sphere. Eventually, they find the answer in a colossal empty sphere at the planet's core, where the demon prince Bubelgor has taken residence. This giant entity, having grown powerful from devouring humans on Kokulos, dislikes the metallic ants wandering through its lair. Taking the form of a massive armoured leech with a warp vortex instead of a head, Bubelgor summons his demonic legions and crashes into the thick of the Necrons. In the darkness, a fierce battle rages. The Necron army perishes after the tunnels start to change and take new shapes. Bubelgor and his countless bloodletters crush the isolated Necron strike squads one after another. The Necrons are destroyed, and their metallic skulls still lie in piles within the deep and cold bowels of the planet. Year 765 of the 41st millennium. The fate of Brama. Under the command of Iron Father Cardan Stronos, the clan company Raukaan directs its forces to engage in the war on the planet Broma, from whose depths an immortal threat arises. Using ancient and mysterious technologies, the race that would later become known in the Imperium as the Necrons cracked the Earth's crust, and within days the ocean waters drained into a massive rift. Deep within this oceanic trench, a long-buried tomb complex awakens from which countless thousands of relentless metallic soldiers emerge to exterminate the planet's unfortunate populace. Immediately upon arriving at the conflict zone, the Iron Hands descend into the abyss, intending to unleash the wrath of the Omnisia on the heart of the Xenos tomb complex. Stronos orders his Space Marines to hold back the Machine Legion's assault, buying time to install a mysterious device they have brought with them, thereby avenging the deaths of so many planet inhabitants. Year 781 of the 41st millennium, the rise of the Stormlord. Control over the Sautek dynasty is seized by Nemesor Imhotep. By executing any aristocrat foolish enough to stand in his way, Imhotep solidifies his status, declaring himself Pharaon. In the year following his resurrection, the Dolmen Gates and the tomb ships of Mandragora are fully prepared, after which the Stormlord seriously begins his campaign to reconquer the galaxy. Year 783 of the 41st millennium. Madrax stirred. Eldrad Ulthran experiences a vision wherein a fleet of Imperial explorers inadvertently awakens a Necron tomb on the dead world of Medrax. Before night falls, the Asuriani of Ulthwé venture forth to the planet via the webway and destroy the human ships in a series of surgical strikes. Then the damned mass deploy onto the surface and eliminate the Necrons before they fully awaken. Yet the Eldar do not manage to remain unseen when a nearby Blood Angel's battle barge arrives to investigate the disappearance of the explorers. It intercepts the Ulthwé forces battling their way out of the system and does not let them retreat without losses. Worse still, the presence of Necrons in the Medrax system turns out to be far more extensive than the Farseers of Ulthwé had anticipated. An entire dynasty awakens, one planet after another, and the subsequent battles are fought with a ferocity unseen since the war between the Eldari and the Necrontyr. Year 791 of the 41st millennium. The rise of Imhotep the Stormlord comes to pass exactly as foretold in the prophecy from the Book of the Mournful Night. Upon learning of what has happened, the councils of seers of the craft worlds are forced to acknowledge that the threat warned of by the Alitochi is very real. However, there's no time for mutual recriminations, as the threat grows with each day, and only the Eldar realize its true scale. Once they had access to a vast crystalline map showing the location of every tomb world in the galaxy, but now only fragments of it remain. Even so, with their help, the Aletok, interacting with their extensive network of exodites and outcasts, begin a global battle against the Necrons. While other craft worlds relearn half-forgotten strategies or argue about the best course of action under the circumstances, the people of Aletok carry out preemptive strikes against sleeping tomb worlds and legions of the Risen. Year 799 of the 41st millennium. The reaping is cancelled. A large raiding group of Dark Eldar appears in the system to harvest its orc inhabitants, but discovers that there are no greenskins left. They have all been slaughtered by the awakening dynasties of the Charnavok. The Necrons prove to be an unexpectedly formidable opponent for the Dark Eldar, drawing them into lethal challenges. The surviving Dark Eldar limp back to the Dark City. Year 813 of the 41st millennium. By decree of Nemesor Zandrek, the armies of Gidrim invade the tower world of Canovar and crush the planetary defenders after a 2-week campaign. However, the Necrons' victory is short-lived. A White Scars regiment led by Corsaro Khan arrives on the planet, intent on conducting a punitive mission against the world's former masters. Devastating volleys of Gauss fire destroy the White Scars Thunderhawks moments after the Space Marines' deployment. Khan and his brothers are doomed to a brave death in a series of rapid engagements. Almost all of the White Scars are slain on Uzme Plateau except for Corsaro Khan, whom Zandrek ordered to be captured and bound. Thus, for Khan, begins an unusual period of confinement beneath the surface of Canoavar. Zandrek treats him with respect, though few Necron lords even suspect his presence. At a whimsical celebration, where a variety of treats are laid out before Zandrek and his courtiers, which no one touches, Khan learns that he is but one of many prisoners. The desire for freedom outweighs any bitterness and hostility, and Khan, along with the other captives, secretly plots an escape. Due to the Necron's slow response, the escape initially goes well. Only when Oberon takes command does everything turn dire for the escapees. Several prisoners are personally cleaved by Oberon with a war scythe, after which only Corsaro and an Eldar wanderer named Illich Nightspear, who is soon knocked out of the fight with a powerful blow, remain. The battle then turns into a duel atop a hill of bleeding bodies and shattered machinery. Khan wields his sword more swiftly, driven by the rage of desperation, but Oberon's body heals any damage within seconds. Gradually, Khan tires, and the broad war scythe comes closer with every swing. Ultimately, the Vargard makes an overly quick thrust, which Khan cannot evade, and the war scythe cuts through his armor and plunges deeply into his flesh. Before Oberon can finish his enemy, there is an intervention from an unexpected side. Unknown to the combatants, Zandrek had been watching the fight from afar and, impressed by Khan's skills and bravery, orders Oberon to step aside and release him. Dragging the injured Eldar along, Khan makes it to the surface, finds an undamaged Ta'au-ship, and leaves Canoptek. Khan and Nightspear soon part ways afterward. The Eldar heads to his homeworld on a ship, while the White Scar returns to Chogoris. Upon Khan's return to the Order's planet, the names of Nemesor Zandrek and Vargard Oberon are added to the Scrolls of Vengeance, to offer the aliens as prey in the next great hunt. Heretic Astartes from the Word-Bearers Legion massively attack Thanatos. Defended by the mighty legions of the Orrey dynasty, this tomb world contains an incredible treasure, the celestial Orrey. Moreover, if the fanatical Brotherhood of the Word-Bearers captures the Orrey, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thus begins a bloody, prolonged siege. Necron warriors and immortals stubbornly fight in the rocky landscape of high-gravity Thanatos against the roaring demon engines and religious fervour of the Space Marines. The conflict is resolved only with the intervention of the Cardenath dynasty, whose reinforcements crush the Word-Bearers, trapped between them and the legions of Orrey. However, the war does not end there, as the Cardenath nobility conducts its own amnicidal campaign of destruction and seeks to gain access to the Celestial Planetarium to complete it. In the year 815 of the 41st Millennium, Research Fleet 913, lost in the territory controlled by the tomb world of Gaden, is destroyed by the fleet of Nemesor Azdaron. The craft world Aletok happens upon the remains of the ships after the battle by chance. By the time 3 companies of Ultramarines are sent to search for the explorer fleet, Azdaron had long vanished. However, the presence of Alaitok's Pathfinder vessels draws the Space Marines into a conflict with the Eldar. Year 824 of the 41st millennium. Return of Thasar, the Invincible. The shadow-shrouded imperial world of Athonos is racked by severe earth tremors. The cause remains a mystery until a colossal tomb ship captained by the Necron pirate king Thasar the Invincible emerges from beneath the ground, shedding soil, rock and fragments of Hablok from its hull as it rises after 60 million standard years. The world's defences are, understandably, in disarray. Fortunately for the inhabitants, Thasar has yet to realize that humans are an intelligent form of life and pays no more attention to the panicked defenders than H would to a nest of insects. The Athanosian planetary capital lies in ruins, but the rest of the planet survives relatively unscathed as the tomb ship heads into the stars towards the tomb world of Zapenek, the crown world of the Sarnek dynasty that he will soon rule as Pharaon, pausing only to obliterate a hollow-stealthed Asuryani listening post hidden in near orbit for millennia. In the year 829 of the 41st millennium, Overlord Vitok leads an invasion of the hive world of Ariand. After a long and bloody siege, the governor accepts Vitok's terms, and Ariand becomes a vassal world of the Necron-Altimor dynasty. In the year 873 of the 41st millennium, the warring dynasties of Ritak and Kyra send assassin squads to each other with the aim of eliminating royal courts. The actions of the assassins prove so successful that both worlds are left without leaders. In the year 898 of the 41st millennium, the Arotepk legions march across the surface of a pristine world called Silentia. The Necrons break through the ranks of the combined army of the Harlequins and Eldar from the craft world and take an ancient precious stone located in the very heart of Silentia's world spirit and then disappear into the void. Year 900 of the 41st millennium. The Crusade against Steel. Cardan Stronos directs the entire combat power of the Iron Hands and the Brazen Claws against the Necron dynasty of the Crimson King. Strones refuses to retreat even in the face of the threat of a large-scale counterattack, and together with Garsak clan company, he somehow manages to break through to the Crimson King and deliver a deadly blow, from which the Necron army's command structure irreversibly collapses. The Dark Angel strike team passes through the blockade along the Ghoul Stars and plunges into this nightmare-filled region of space, pursuing a battle brother who they believe is one of the fallen. Eventually, the Space Marines force him to land on the planet made of dust and bones, where it is discovered that all this time they were pursuing the reanimated corpse of a sergeant from their own 4th Company. As the dead man rolls to the ground and scarabs emerge from his mouth and eyes, screaming packs of flayed ones rise up from the surrounding wastelands. Faced with an unexpected enemy, the Space Marines organize a tight defensive formation and back-to-back fend off the assaulting automata with knife fingers. Blood flows like a river, bolters crackle incessantly, and across the oppressive plains, the echo of blades clashing against claws resonates continuously. For over an hour, the numerically superior flayed ones launch themselves at their prey until the Dark Angels are aided by their strike cruiser, which makes a suicidal approach for an attack through the upper layers of the atmosphere, battling with gravity until it drives off the Necrons with a concentrated bombardment and teleports the surviving brothers on board. As soon as the prey slips away, the refreshed commence their feast, and the noise of battle in the night is replaced by the revolting clicking, crunching and sounds of flesh being torn apart, which continues for many hours. Mass abductions on the imperial world named Mandal have begun to occur every night as the night scythes visit, resulting in entire rural villages and small towns vanishing into the darkness without a trace. No one suspects that the cause of all these miseries is the small moon Trantis, a Necron staging post which, upon awakening, began executing ancient directives to stockpile Mandal's resources for transport to other worlds. The irony lies in the fact that Trantis's dolmen gates have long been cut off from the webway, and hence the moon now gradually sinks on the plundered resources, which are of little use. Yet the raids continue. In the year 912 of the 41st millennium, A Catan shard of the Void Dragon emerges from its prison and in senseless fury devastates the domains of the Aratep dynasty. Though it is merely a pale shadow of the true Void Dragon, it manages to consume a dozen worlds, expending all its rage on the living before the Aratep cryptex finally manage to cage the shard once again. Between the years 912 and 926 of the 41st millennium, a violent coup takes place on the tomb world Borsis, where a new ruler with expansionist ambitions replaces the former secluded lord. Thus, the long inactive mechanisms of Borsis once again come to life, signalling the start of a campaign that will leave much of the Vidar sector in ruins. Orc war boss Skullrack leads his boys to the world of Fordris, having heard of the ancient and deadly weapons stored there. However, he meets a sad end on an unnamed beach as Necrons emerge from the blood-red waters of the ocean, row by row. The Orcs are exterminated to the last, but not before the local cryptex manage to gather useful combat information, thanks to which the masters of Fordris, the Mefrit dynasty, calculate that the efficiency of their warriors is only 70%. In pursuit of additional data, they lure an Adeptus Mechanicus archaeological expedition to them, and the sands of their planet are once again stained red. In the year 943 of the 41st millennium, Trazin the Infinite claims to have found the Song of Entropy, one of the missing artifacts of the Vulcan, which leads to the Decade War between the Salamanders and the Necrons of Solemnes. As it turned out, Trazin was bluffing to lure Histan into a trap and once again attempt to kill the Forge Father in order to obtain the coveted Spear of Vulcan. The Space Marines of the 6th Company fight back-to-back, knee-deep in the remains of their foes, ceaselessly firing their bolters and flamers at the encroaching Necrons. Throughout the battle, 40 battle brothers are killed, but in the end, Histan defeats Trazin again. In the year 947 of the 41st millennium, the War for Utu Prime. After the enemy refuses to accept the generous terms of surrender, Nemisor Zandrek begins a devastating attack on the planet Utu Prime. He is opposed by the Katakan regiments, supported by no less than 3 Imperial Fists companies. However, even such forces fail to hold back the might of the ancient warlord's legions. Although the humans fight like true heroes, they suffer monstrous losses when Zandrek activates an ancient war machine called the Megalith. The surviving defenders, who had made their last stand at the governor's citadel, die one by one in bloody combats with the Vargard Oberon himself and the Lichguard of Zandrek. The conquest of Utu Prime becomes yet another testament to the might of the Necrons, year 973 of the 41st millennium. As if by some whim of fate, a Necron tomb under the icy crust of Damnos quickly regains full functionality after its slumber is accidentally disturbed during mining operations. The presence of Imperial settlers violated the rest of the Damnosian Necrons, awakening them sooner than the resurrection program had managed to complete its full cycle. As a result, their personality engrams were severely damaged, and the devastating madness, so typical for the Necron race, afflicted every member of the Sautek dynasty and all the Nealach lords. The lords of Damnos had long considered themselves outcasts, but in reality they still formally belonged to the very powerful Sautek dynasty. Their allies, the lords of Nealach, had maintained an agreement with the Necrons of Damnos for millennia, only reinforcing the latter's delusion of their own independence. However, the intrigues of the Necrons barely concerned the Space Marine drop forces who engaged them in battle. For the Space Marines, all were vile Xenos that were to be judged as such. Eventually, after slaughtering the human settlers and repelling the counterattack of the Second Company of the Ultramarines, the Necrons of Damnos activate the Dolmen Gates and once again seize a key webway portal, driving out the Eldar, who had claimed these paths during the Great Sleep. With renewed access to the webway, raiding groups from Damnos spread out across the entire Ultima Segmentum, unleashing bloody carnage everywhere. The loss of Damnos dealt a devastating blow to the morale of the Imperials. In the 25 years that passed since that battle, Cato Sicarius, who had suffered a bitter defeat there, never smiled once. Year 973 of the 41st millennium. The Awakening. The knightly world of Avaris finds itself almost entirely overrun by the Necrons of the Sautek dynasty. Awoken from their long slumber deep beneath the planet's surface, the machine legions immediately commenced the genocide of the human population. Only the skill of the knights and the effectiveness of their ion shields, which neutralize the lethal firepower of the Necrons' advanced weaponry, prevent total annihilation. The defenders suffer heavy losses, but the three knightly houses of Avaris slowly gain the upper hand. The fierce struggle continues, and the involved Imperial Knight household units gradually push the enemy forces back to their tomb complexes, preparing to destroy the foe in their own lair. Year 976 of the 41st millennium. The Sautek dynasty expands its territories in the Tau-controlled region of space and invades a world belonging to the Kroot. Although the Kroot win the initial clashes, their attempt to taste the living metal leads to lethal consequences. Nanoscarabs, a terrible plague, sweep through their ranks. Year 979 of the 41st millennium. The beast is slain. A sept world of the Tau, known as Anvos, is almost completely overrun by a sudden Tyranid invasion. But salvation comes from an entirely unexpected direction. Several legions of Necrons from the Atun dynasty mercilessly attack the Tyranid swarm of horrors. Though the swarm fights with the fierceness of a wounded beast, the Tyranids find themselves caught between the advancing Necrons and the defending Tau. As the last of the Tyranid falls dead, the entire Necron army turns and leaves without explanation. The bewildered Tau offer thanks for their mysterious salvation, little realizing that they had witnessed the servants of the Silent King at work. Year 984 of the 41st millennium. Venerable Dreadnought Damnos led a strike force of 20 Iron Hands dreadnoughts to scour the planet after excavations, awoke the Necron forces of Overlord Capark of the Nihilak dynasty. Year 989 of the 41st millennium. The Clawed Plague. The Agdagath dynasty leaves the planet Tyr after it has been overtaken by the Flayed One. Year 997 of the 41st millennium. Lament for the Angels. The system of the planet was invaded by the Necron Maynarch dynasty. Such was the resistance of the Angels' Revenant that the Xenos were forced to break through Libethra's crust and unleash the planet's molten core to destroy the chapter with their home planet. Despite these drastic measures, however, the war on the planet did not end, as the remnants of both the Angels' Revenant as well as the Necron ground forces survived in caverns deep beneath Libethra's surface, continuing their battle. Eventually, this was discovered by an Imperial Torchbearers fleet, which helped to destroy the remaining Necrons and reclaimed what was left of the planet. Year 999 of the 41st millennium. Despite the Inquisition's efforts to suppress all knowledge of the Necrons' re-emergence into the galaxy, the Imperium's faith in its military supremacy was shaken by the news that spread across the galaxy after the 974th year of the 41st millennium, that these Xenos had overcome both the Imperial Guard and the Ultramarines at Damnos. Eventually, reports of the loss of Damnos made their way to Terra, where both the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the High Lords of Terra decreed that the Ultramarines must return to Damnos and eradicate the Necron threat once and for all. 25 standard years after the Damnos incident, in the 999th year of the 41st millennium, this Imperial Order was brought to Macragge by the experienced Deathwatch strike team led by Squad Lazarius. Chapter Master Marneus Calgar was not pleased with the Imperium's decree, for he knew that his second company had faced only a fraction of the awakened Necrons on Damnos a quarter of a Terran century before. Once they returned to Damnos, the Ultramarines would face the entire strength of a Necron tomb world and risk the deaths of hundreds of the chapters Astartes. Yet Calgar knew that the High Lords of Terra were right, and that the Necrons on Damnos must be defeated if the Imperium was ever to know peace in the face of the growing Necron threat. With the record of the Ultramarines stained by the action on Damnos, it was their duty to banish the ghosts of the past. Upon hearing Calgar's announcement that the Ultramarines' 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th and 6th companies, accompanied by elements of the 10th, would return to reclaim Damnos for the Emperor, Cato Sicarius smiled for the first time in solar decades. It is said that during the preparation for the assault, Sicarius trained so hard that he fought with the fury of a man possessed, and even slept in the cage vault. By the time the Necrons had spotted the true location of the Ultramarine warships, the Astartes fleet was in a position to launch their drop pods. Their objective was to destroy the pyramidal complexes that controlled the Necron power grid, and to do it before the Imperial forces were overwhelmed. However, one factor that they did not account for was the physical incarnation of a Titan, a Khatan shard of Igrania, the world shaper, held within a tesseract vault. It was determined that this vault was the true source of the Necrons' power and must be neutralized if the Imperial forces were to have any hope of victory. Despite the power brought to bear by the Imperial assault on Damnos, Marneus Calgar felt like a duelist being taken apart by a superior foe in the battle cage. The Xenos' battle logic proved impeccable, with its master intelligence anticipating the Ultramarines' every move and neutralizing each tactic they employ. Thanks to an energy shield emitting from the vault, every plasma volley and melter blast employed against the Necron monoliths dissipated harmlessly or detonated prematurely before it could harm the constructs. Since the Xenos had managed to analyze the Ultramarines' battle doctrine, Calgar realized he must attempt a completely unexpected stratagem. Assaulting the ranks of the Necron Immortals, the Chapter Master jumped onto the metallic base of a malfunctioning Gauss pylon and slowly pushed the war engine's crescent back until its viridian beam hit the energy shield of the floating necropolis. With a blinding flash of light, the energy shield protecting the tomb complex collapsed, and the tesseract vault was broken wide open to reveal the enraged demigod imprisoned within. A giant cruciform of pure light rose above the Necron army, the remnants of the Khatan's energy cage still crackling around it. Roaring in exultation at its newfound freedom, the booming sound threw Ultramarines and Necrons alike to the icy ground and cracked the planet's crust. Its first victim would be the Necron overlord, the Undying, which the star god crushed with ease by transforming the earth around his metallic form into an oversized fist. The Overlord phased out of reality, seeking to escape back to his subterranean lair, but deep underground the surviving members of the Death Watch's squad Lazarius had reached their own objective. The Undying teleported back to his cabled sarcophagus right in front of the Death Watch's eyes. Unfortunately for the Necron, the crack team of Astartes had replaced his revivification engines with melter charges and entropic destabilizers and proceeded to blast the Necron overlord into atoms. Back on the surface, the Xenos reeled from the loss of their leader and the artificially intelligent command programs that had governed their warriors' every action. Meanwhile, the unleashed Satan lashed out in fury at both its Necron enslavers and the Ultramarines as Captain Sicarius duelled a Flayed One's lord. After ramming his power sword into the powerful Flayed One's torso, Sicarius summoned 25 Terran years of anger and frustration into a final burst of strength. He unclipped the vortex grenade that had been given to him earlier and activated the weapon before throwing it at the enraged demigod hovering overhead. The grenade detonated and formed a spiraling orb of nothingness as its unstoppable force sucked the Khatan into the warp before collapsing and winking out of existence. Year 999 of the 41st millennium. As the tendrils of the Hive Fleet Leviathan reached towards the Kryptos system, sleeping Necrons from the Mephrit dynasty, resting in their tombs on the long-dead planet named Perdita for countless millennia, begin to stir. Arriving at the call for help, Anrakir the Traveller and the local ruler Zarathustra the Ineffable forge a desperate alliance with Lord Dante and the Blood Angels to save the Tomb World from the Tyranids. After Zarathustra and Anrakir form the alliance, their forces split. The former heads to the gas giant Eros, attempting to cleanse the Kryptos system of all life forms, while the latter remains in the battle zone of Asphodex. Year 999 of the 41st millennium, the Imgur monolith. Since the onset of the Night of 1,000 Rifts, 3 star systems near Oberon are enveloped by a new warp storm, designated Cerberus, because it resembles a 3-headed dog devouring the sky. Soon, the sacred investigators of Mars shed light on the purpose of the Imgur monolith, after an ideal sphere of silence forms in the warp around this rune-covered monument, effectively sidestepping the raging Cerberus. In the latest report, the tech priests described this ancient stone as a Necron phase node of incredible power. Its glow intensifies to the point that even during the day, a pulsating green rectangle is visible in the sky above the nearby planet Attila. A month prior, thousands of Sautek dynasty flying pyramids, which had formed a perfect order around the Imgur monolith, constructing something akin to a cage, were spotted there. According to the auto-seances of the Psychers, silent battles rage deep in space every night between winged demons and Necron fighters. Moreover, the Seers insist that every Necron ship that comes into contact with the obelisk is not destroyed but somehow duplicated. The beginning of the 42nd millennium, the Black Crusades of Abaddon, the Despoiler, reach their zenith, leading to a catastrophe of cosmic proportions. Neither the Imperium nor even the Necrons know that the Chaos Lord has been moving towards this moment for 10,000 years, destroying ancient Necrontyr structures built to prevent warp from seeping into real space. The Cadian pylons and dozens of other astromantic edifices were obliterated, resulting in the wounds on the fabric of reality reaching a critical threshold and merging to spawn the Cicatrix Maledictum. The Necrons of the Sautek dynasty launch a series of attacks along the western frontier of the Empire. Elite contingents from the Tau Fire caste and the Ta'aun are dispatched to combat the invaders. They are led by Commander Ovesh, a protege of the very Shadow Sun, who has been awarded high honours during the Third Sphere expansion campaigns. Relying on the tactical manoeuvres of the Aunva, he splits his group into hunting packs and strikes at the invaders' flanks. By halting the advance of the aliens, Ovesh wins the besieged empire the time needed to gather and send reinforcements. By the order of Belisarius Call, the Magos Dominus Dentrex Ologostion heads to excavate the Black Stone, buried under the surface of the Forge world, Amenhotep II. As soon as the cluster of Noctilith obelisks is revealed, Necrons rise from beneath the rust-coloured sands. The ancient Forge world of Amenhotep II houses an even more ancient race, whose presence could not be uncovered by even the most meticulous geoscopical surveys of the Adeptus Mechanicus for millennia. The conquests the Necrons undertake are merciless and terrifyingly effective. In every segmentum they cleanse life from their sovereign domains with the same indifference with which an extermination servitor eradicates pests in a harbour warehouse. And this is not a disorderly attack, but precisely planned strikes at the very foundation of the galactic empire of Adeptus Mechanicus. On the front line of the new war march, the Cryptex Technomancers, these enigmatic geniuses lead phalanxes of metallic, undead and insect-like Canoptech wraiths in battle against followers of the machine god on hundreds of resource-rich planets. Soon after Magos Ologostion set his sights on Amenhotep II, out came Technomandrite Cryptex Azdrak from the Sautek dynasty to stop him. According to Azdrak, humanity, unbeknownst to itself, decided to seize the most valuable of natural riches, and now it is time to show these pitiful mortals their place. Among the ruins of desolation, the Death Guard finds themselves ambushed by superior forces of the Necrons from the Novok dynasty. Retreating in combat, the Sons of Mortarion infect many Necron warriors with the Ferric Blight. As a result, the androids teleported to the base bring a deadly disease into the stasis crypts of their homeworld, causing an epidemic of catastrophic proportions. The Cabal of the Broken Sigil launches a massive offensive against the Sautek dynasty, after which the Necrons soon resort to technosacral constructs powered by enslaved shards of the Khitan. Across every sector of the wide front, the Cabalites focus all efforts on destroying the captive star gods, then withdraw from the combat. The conquering armies of the Sultek dynasty attack the planets Belus Prime and Attila. House Vulca finds itself alone against the enemy. When it is discovered that many of the most inaccessible and inhospitable local mountain ridges are in reality Necron tombs, which over millennia have become covered with stone deposits. Further south in the galaxy, House Terran unites with other Imperial forces after the Silver Automatons rise from previously calm lakes in their home world of Voltoris. The Supreme King Tybalt calls back entire battle groups currently in the Damocles Gulf, thus abandoning the Imperial defenders of Agrellan to their fate. At present, even by the most optimistic estimates of the Imperium, more than 1,000 tomb worlds have already awakened, although the Eldar suggest an even higher number, and thanks to the efforts of the Anrakir, the Traveller, Imatek the Stormlord, and dozens of less well-known Pharaons and Nemesas, the Necron race is awakening ever faster. Billions, however, still sleep, but with each passing day the legions grow and the galaxy already trembles at their